Good morning. It is Wednesday, January the 9th, and this is The Drill. And thank you very much. This is Ron, your host, the only true conservative in the United States of America today, because I'm the only one that makes the presumption for the status quo. Speaking to all the butchers, bakers, and candlestick makers out there. When the waters were changed. Once upon a time, Kadir, the teacher of Moses, called upon mankind with a warning. At a certain date, he said, all the water in the world, which had not been specially hoarded, would disappear. It would then be renewed with different water, which would drive men mad. Only one man listened to the meaning of this advice. He collected water and went to a secure place where he stored it, and he waited for the water to change its character. On the appointed date, the streams stopped running, the wells went dry, and the man who had listened, seeing this happening, went to his retreat and drank his preserved water. When he saw from his security the waterfalls again beginning to flow, this man descended among the other sons of men. He found that they were thinking and talking in an entirely different way from before. Yet they had no memory of what had happened, nor of having been warned. When he tried to talk to them, he realized that they thought that he was mad, and they showed hostility or compassion, not understanding. At first, he drank none of the new water, but went back to his concealment to draw upon his supplies every day. Finally, however, he took the decision to drink the new water because he could not bear the loneliness of living, behaving, and thinking in a different way from everyone else. He drank the new water and became like the rest. Then he forgot all about his own store of special water, and his fellows began to look upon him as a madman who had miraculously been restored to sanity. And I'm reading this little story because it illustrates perfectly what's at stake today in our society. The battle today is not political. The battle is over sanity. Don't forget that. Now, I want to relate a little conversation that I had the other day, and an individual I know came up to me and said, "Hey, Donald Trump is did you know that Donald Trump is the most corrupt president we've ever had?" Now, I was alerted to this because this is a statement that was made by a lefty politician of some sort the other day. So I figured one of the rank and file would sooner or later pick up on this talking point and use it on me. And sure enough, this guy did. So I'm in public when this occurred. I was at the grocery store. So because normally what you could do if you're on your own turf, if you're in your house, you're in your car, your own place of business, then you can simply ignore them. Just walk away. Shrug your shoulders. Because what they're trying to do is they're trying to bait you. They want you to either agree with them or to shut the hell up. Or maybe throw a temper tantrum and get yourself in trouble along the way. So you don't have to do any of those. Those options are not exhaustive. You can also... because what, in essence, this individual was trying to do to me was psychologize, was use a psychological tool or technique, a cheap one that's used in the 7th grade by students all the time. But I can respond by intellectualizing the conversation, and that's what I did. All I did was answer with one word, a question, really? And he then responded, he was taken aback for a second because he expected me to step in and defend the president. So really kind of threw him. And then he asked, "Oh, come on now. You can't tell me that you don't know that President Trump is the most corrupt president we've ever had." And I answered him honestly. I said, well, as a matter of fact, I hadn't really thought about it, which was true. I was at the grocery store. I was concentrating on my grocery list. I wasn't bothering to think about Donald Trump. So, and then I followed up with the question, what is the most corrupt thing about President Trump? Now, at this particular point in the conversation, I win. Doesn't matter how he responds. He's going to do one of two things. He's either going to end up giving me a dirty look if he knows what he's doing. Probably not. Most of the left don't know what they're doing. They just follow orders, so to speak. But he's either going to give me a dirty look and I'm going to go on about my business, or he's going to attempt to answer the question. And when he attempts to answer the question, I have succeeded in intellectualizing the conversation. Now we're on my turf as a conservative. That's what part of being a conservative is all about. Being intellectual, thinking, using your mind rather than your emotions. So at that particular point, like I said, I had the conversation well in hand. And that's the way to handle those situations. You're going to get people from the left that are going to ambush you. You're going to be at work, minding your own business, and somebody's going to walk up to you while you're in the hallway or in the break room or maybe at your desk and hit you with something like that. So, or sometimes with news. Hey, did you hear that Donald Trump this? Or did you hear that there was a Supreme Court decision or whatever? And one of the best ways to do it is, again, intellectualize the conversation. If they're making a statement, ask a question. Really, when did this happen? Really, what were the details about the decision? The left doesn't want to get into that. The left doesn't want to have an intellectual conversation. They want to exercise power. They want to bully and intimidate, and hopefully not even bully and intimidate, but at least manipulate people, act like puppet masters. So by intellectualizing the conversation, you deny them that power. Because again, you got to remember, the only reason the left has any power in this country at all is because of conservatives, because of ignorant conservatives. Don't be ignorant. All right, when I come back, I'm going to be reading from the Ayn Rand lexicon. Thank you very much. Excuse me. Hold on a second. So I try not to eat or drink anything just before broadcast so I don't end up with a frog in my throat. Unfortunately, I ended up with one anyhow. I'll just have to continue. The concept of the day is ecology/environmental movement. Ecology is a social principle, condemns cities, culture, industry, technology, the intellect, and advocates men's return to nature, to the state of grunting sub-animals digging the soil with their bare hands. Or as I like to say, be natural, poop is natural, don't be natural. An Asian peasant who labors through all of his waking hours with tools created in biblical times, a South American aborigine who is devoured by piranha in a jungle stream, an African who is bitten by the tsetse fly, an Arab whose teeth are green with decay in his mouth. These do live with their natural environment, but are scarcely able to appreciate its beauty. Try to tell a Chinese mother whose child is dying of cholera. Should one do everything one can? Of course not. Try to tell a Russian housewife who trudges miles on foot in sub-zero weather in order to spend hours standing in line at a state store dispensing food rations that America is defiled by shopping centers, expressways, and family cars. In Western Europe, in the pre-industrial Middle Ages, man's life expectancy was 30 years. In the 19th century, Europe's population grew by 300%. Which is the best proof of the fact that for the first time in human history, industry gave the great masses of people a chance to survive. If it were true that a heavy concentration of industry is destructive to human life, one would find life expectancy declining in the more advanced countries, but has been rising steadily. Here are the figures on life expectancy in the United States from the Metropolitan Life Insurance Company. And you got to remember, folks, she wrote this in the 1960s. 1900, if you were, I guess, you were born in 1900, 47.3 years. 1920, 53 years. 1940, 60 years. 1968, 70.2 years. The latest figures compiled. Anyone over 30 years of age today, give a silent thank you to the nearest, grimiest, sootiest smokestacks you can find. The dinosaur and its fellow creatures vanished from this earth long before there were any industrialists or any men, but this did not end life on Earth. Contrary to the ecologists, nature does not stand still and does not maintain the kind of equilibrium that guarantees the survival of any particular species, least of all the survival of her greatest and most fragile product, man. Now observe that in all the propaganda of the ecologists, amidst all their appeals to nature and pleas for harmony with nature, there is no discussion of man's needs and the requirements of his survival. Man is treated as if he were an unnatural phenomenon. Man cannot survive in the kind of state of nature that the ecologists envision, i.e. on the level of sea urchins or polar bears. In order to survive, man has to discover and produce everything he needs, which means that he has to alter his background and adapt it to his needs. Nature has not equipped him for adapting himself to his background in the manner of animals. From the most primitive cultures to the most advanced civilizations, man has had to manufacture things. His well-being depends on his success at production. The lowest human tribe cannot survive without that alleged source of pollution, fire. It is not merely symbolic that fire was the property of the gods which Prometheus brought to man. The ecologists are the new vultures swarming to extinguish that fire. Without machines and technology, the task of mere survival is a terrible mind and body wrecking ordeal. In nature, the struggle for food, clothing, and shelter consumes all of a man's energy and spirit. It is a losing struggle. The winner is any flood, earthquake, or swarm of locusts. Consider the 500,000 bodies left in the wake of a single flood in Pakistan. They had been men who lived without technology. To work only for bare necessities is a luxury that mankind cannot afford. It has been reported in the press many times that the issue of pollution is the next big crusade of the new left activists after the war in Vietnam peters out. And just as peace was not their goal or motive in that crusade, so clean air is not their goal or motive in this one. The immediate goal is obvious, the destruction of the remnants of capitalism in today's mixed economy. Let's see. And the establishment of a global dictatorship. This goal does not have to be inferred. Many speeches and books on the subject state explicitly that the ecological crusade is a means to that end. If, after the failure of such accusations as, quote, capitalism leads you to the poorhouse, unquote, and, quote, capitalism leads you to war, unquote, the new left is left with nothing better than, quote, capitalism defiles the beauty of your countryside, unquote. One may justifiably conclude that, as an intellectual power, the collectivist movement is through. City smog and filthy rivers are not good for men, though they are not the kind of danger that the ecological panic mongers proclaim them to be. This is a scientific, technological problem, not a political one, and it can be solved only by technology. Even if a smog were a risk to human life, we must remember that life in nature without technology is wholesale death. Now, the thing that she's making the mistake here is not realizing why it is the left goes on about ecology all the time. Back in the day, it was called ecology. Now it's called the environment. And we have global warming as the issue du jour about the environment or about ecology and ecological disaster. Why? Because there's only one planet. There's many countries, nation states. Okay, and lots of individual property owners. So how is it that you get individuals to quit thinking as an individual and look at themselves as part of a collective? Well, one of the best ways is to convince them that, hey, we're all on this planet together, and that anything you do is going to affect people on the other side of the earth. And there's a little bit of science to back that up. You can hear about a volcano that erupts on one side of the earth, and that some month later it's traveled, the ashes of that, the smoke and the ashes of that have traveled to the other side of the earth. So it's very easy to collectivize the problems, therefore. And so the way that Ayn Rand should have approached this in terms of the solution is not about technology, but saying that it is an individual issue. It's not a global issue. It is not a human being or, considered in total issue. It's an issue of individuals, and it's a problem for each individual to solve. If I go outside of my house and and the air's clean, and there's I don't have any filth in my front yard trash, and I turn on the tap water and the water's clean, I'm good to go. Okay, the rest of it is somebody else's business. As long as my property is clean and I'm not, again, burying radioactive waste in my backyard, or my neighbors aren't doing things that would disturb my enjoyment of my own property, then it's none of my business. So again, collectivized problems lead to collectivized solutions. And one of the problems that's easiest to collectivize is problems of the ecology or the environment. Back in a minute. All right, thank you very much. Welcome back. And I'm going to be reading now from a book about covert emotional manipulation. And I've been reading this before. I haven't read it for about the past week or so, but now I'm we're at chapter 2. How can you tell if you're being manipulated? 19 signs. And I'm reading this because these are the tools and the actual tools and tactics and techniques that the left uses, the rank and file use each and every day on each one of us. Okay? Emotional manipulation can be so subtle and undercover that it can control you for a long time before you figure out what's happening, if you ever do at all. Some manipulators are highly skilled. They are described as puppet masters, and you could unknowingly become a puppet if you don't know the signs. As your strings are pulled this way and that, you do just what the puppet master wants you to do. You think you're acting from your own free will, but you are not. If you're a victim of manipulation, you probably know something is wrong, but you're not quite sure what it is. You might even suspect that you're being manipulated, but you don't know for sure if you are or how it's being done. One thing you do know is that you want answers. Are you being manipulated or not? How can you tell? Actually, it is easier and more obvious than you might think it is. It's smart to learn the techniques of covert emotional manipulation, and you'll do just that in the next chapter. But the truth is, you don't have to know anything at all about the techniques to know if you're being manipulated. You only need to look at yourself to know if manipulation is at play. Manipulation is detrimental and has profound negative effects on us, even if we don't know that it's happening. Those negative effects are the evidence left when the crime of manipulation has taken place. If you're in a relationship and notice any of the following signs, there's a high probability you are being manipulated. Your joy at finding love has turned into the fear of losing it. Your feelings have gone from happiness and euphoria to anxiety, sadness, and even desperation. And that could be changed to your joy at finding a job has turned into your fear of losing it. Your feelings have gone from, again, happiness and euphoria to anxiety, sadness, and even desperation. Your mood depends entirely on the state of the relationship, and you're experiencing extreme highs and lows. You're unhappy in the relationship and uncertain about it most of the time, yet you dread losing it because you're blissfully happy every now and then. You feel like you're responsible for ruining the best thing that ever happened to you, but you're not sure how. Your relationship feels very complex, although you don't know why. When talking to others about it, you might find yourself saying, quote, "It's hard to explain. It's just really complicated," unquote. You continually obsess about the relationship, analyzing every detail repeatedly in a desperate attempt to, quote, "figure it out," unquote. You'll talk about it all the time to anyone who will listen. It doesn't do any good. You never feel sure of where you stand with your partner, which leaves you in a perpetual state of uncertainty and anxiety. You frequently ask your partner if something is wrong. It really does feel as if something's wrong, but you're not sure what it is. You're frequently on the defensive. You feel misunderstood, and you have the need to explain and defend yourself. You seem to have developed a problem with trust, jealousy, insecurity, anger, or overreaction, which your partner has pointed out to you on many occasions. You feel ongoing anger or resentment for someone. You have become a detective. You scour the web for information about your partner, keep a close eye on his or her social media accounts, and feel a need to check their web search history, texts, or emails. When they are not at home, you have a desire to verify their whereabouts as you worry about where they really are. You feel that you don't truly know how to make your partner happy. You try hard, but nothing seems to work, at least not for long. You used to make them very happy, and you're not sure what has changed. Expressing negative thoughts and emotions feels restricted or even forbidden, so you try to keep those things to yourself. You feel frustrated at being unable to talk about things that are bothering you. You don't feel as good about yourself as you did before the relationship. You feel less confident, less secure, less intelligent, less sane, less trusting, less attractive, or in some other way, less than what you were before. You always feel you're falling short of your partner's expectations. You feel inadequate. You often feel guilty and find yourself apologizing a lot. You continually try to repair damage you believe you've caused. You blame yourself for your partner pulling away from you. You can't understand why you keep sabotaging the relationship. You carefully control your words, actions, and emotions around your partner to keep him or her from withdrawing their affection again. At times you are up like an emotional volcano filled with anger, frustration, and even hostility. You have never acted this way before and vow that you will stop. But no matter how hard you try, it keeps happening. You do things you aren't really comfortable with or that go against your values, limits, or boundaries in order to make your partner happy and keep the relationship intact. So, this is basically describes the relationship between Republicans and Democrats today, or between conservatives and socialists / liberals. I think it's a perfect description of the dynamic between the two. You should have your back to the book now. You should have your answer. There is one caveat. If your past relationships have had any ongoing pattern of insecurity, mistrust, and fear of abandonment, you may have a psychological issue that would benefit from professional intervention. You might be wondering how you or anyone else could stay in a relationship that causes fear, anxiety, depression, self-doubt, confusion, and frustration. Wouldn't you know something is terribly wrong? Why would you stay? First, relationships don't start out this way. In fact, the relationship probably got off to an amazing start. He or she seemed like your perfect partner, maybe even your soulmate, and the honeymoon phase was idyllic. When things took a turn for the worse, you had no idea what was really going on. Naturally, you would try to work things out and regain what once was so promising and wonderful. Having been manipulated into blaming yourself for the problems, you hang on and desperately try to repair the damage you believe you caused and regain your partner's love. Your loyalty seems to pay off, and you and your partner are once again close and loving for a while. It becomes a cycle, one that you're not fully aware of. Second, manipulation begins slowly and insidiously and gradually escalates. Manipulation is an evolving process over time, according to Harriet B. Breaker, Ph.D., author of, quote, Who's Pulling Your Strings, unquote. Breaker says victims are controlled through a series of promised gains and threatened losses, covertly executed through a variety of manipulation tactics. In other words, the manipulation builds gradually as the abuser creates uncertainty and doubt by going back and forth from giving you what you desire to threatening to take it away. This cycle will be discussed in more detail in the chapter on manipulation tactic of intermittent reinforcement. Joe Navarro, M.A., a 25-year veteran of the FBI and author of the book Dangerous Personalities, writes, quote, In the end, it doesn't matter how you got into that relationship. It is the realization that it is one-sided, exploitive, and toxic that counts. The questions that need to be asked are very simple. Are they using their charms or behavior to control you or others for their own benefit? Are they manipulating you? Are they doing things that hurt you or put you at risk? Do you feel like this relationship is one-sided? Are you hurting in this relationship? If the answer to these questions is yes, it is time to untangle yourself from the toxic strings that control you so you can get your life back. Take heed. You have no social obligation to be victimized. Ever. Unquote. And emotional manipulation is emotional abuse. There's a saying that to use somebody is to abuse them. A person who controls your feelings and behavior with manipulation does not value or respect you or care about your well-being. Leave the relationship if at all possible and seek professional counseling if necessary. Involvement with a skilled manipulator can result in serious and lasting harm. Only you can decide if a relationship is worthwhile and salvageable or if it is detrimental to you and needs to end. The last chapter will provide you with resources that will enable you to learn how to deal with manipulators. Awareness is one of your primary defenses against covert manipulation. With that thought, what follows are descriptions of 30 covert emotional manipulative tactics. A few of them will be explored in more depth in chapters that follow. So we'll save that part for next time. So we'll be back in a minute. Thank you very much. Welcome back. And now I'm going to be reading about reclaiming American culture. It's called Out of the Ashes. And when we left this last, it was the author was talking about the first chapter was reclaiming the truth, and that's the first thing that has to be done if you're going to reclaim your culture. This section of this chapter is called Why Do We Lie? No one ever takes a picture of his son's first lie. Why does a child lie? We all know. He lies because he broke the cookie jar when his mother told him to leave it alone. She lies because she teased her baby sister and made her cry when her mother told her to be nice. Children lie to hide the bad things they have done. So does everyone else. When Adam and Eve have eaten the fruit of the forbidden tree, they feel for the first time that they must obstruct knowledge, that they must obfuscate. They begin by concealing themselves from one another. Then they try to hide from God. Their language is indirect. Adam first passes the blame to Eve, perhaps hoping all the punishment will light upon her, insinuating that God was to blame for making her in the first place. Then Eve passes the blame to the serpent. Milton sums up their state in words whose concentrated insight is unsurpassed. Up they rose, as from unrest, and each the other viewing, soon found their eyes how opened, and their minds how darkened, innocence, that as a veil had shadowed them from knowing ill, was gone. Just confidence and native righteousness, and honor from about them naked, left to guilty shame. He covered, but his robe uncovered more. The most revealing thing about us is that we conceal. We tell lies. We tell them to hide from others and ourselves our wrongs and our failures. We tell them to manipulate and fool others into doing what we want. We tell them to destroy our enemies, and then the lie enters the common language like a small cancer, growing quietly and assimilating what should have been healthy tissue to itself. We must not tell lies. We must not even speak the lie's language. This is no simple matter. Sincerity has nothing to do with it. Adolf Hitler was sincere. He believed what he said, and he was still one of the most thorough liars in the 20th century, which is saying a great deal. That is because the lie has coiled itself around the convolutions of his mind so that he could no longer distinguish truth from falsehood. Most slogans are lies, as George Orwell tried to teach us. Orwell understood that the foundation of tyranny is the corruption of language. He knew whereof he spoke. During the war, he worked at the British Broadcasting Corporation, an experience he then used as the basis for the Ministry of Truth in his novel 1984. The Ministry of Truth is the business of destroying evidence of things that have actually happened, sending it down the, quote, memory hole, unquote, and crafting cunning lies in debased and simplistic language for widespread consumption by viewers of the state-controlled television journalism, that is. Malcolm Muggeridge, a friend of Orwell and truth-teller also, wondered in a bemused way why the English left would do what the English left would do after the Ribbentrop-Molotov Accord, when it became known that the Russians were aiding and abetting Hitler and the Nazis. Would they then disown the Soviets? Would they experience a crisis of conscience? How long would that crisis last? A day or two, it seems. They flipped on a dime. Hitler and the Nazis were now not so bad after all. When the Russians and Hitler fell out, and the Russians joined the Allies, then they flipped again. Orwell put it nicely in 1984. A government speaker is literally in mid-oration, about to condemn the enemy, Eurasia, when somebody runs up to him and delivers him a written message. He reads it and revises his speech accordingly. Eastasia is the enemy, and Eurasia is the ally. Oceania is at war with Eastasia. Oceania has always been at war with Eastasia. And he actually believes what he is saying. That is the lie at its most potent. It is the snake in the brain. Of course, so long as we remain human, we must still have in us some sense of truth, however choked or smothered it may be. Then the lie involves a suppression or perversion of our very humanity. A still small voice within whispers to us, "It is not true. You know it is not true. Oceania has not always been at war with Eastasia. 2 and 2 do not make 5. A child is not better off at daycare center where no one loves him than at home with his mother. Watching porn is not mere recreation. Your vote does not have any more impact than that of a grain of sand against a cliff. A life in which you do not know your neighbors is not more human than what your grandparents enjoyed," and so forth. The still small voice must be drowned out under noise. The louder and more persistent the lie, the more egregious is its falsehood. People do not host parades to celebrate parking in a no-parking zone. We must not accept the terms of the lies. A few of us may have to speak in the lie's argot just to engage the liars and the gulled in conversation. The rest of us should not speak or think of it at all. We want neither to manipulate nor to be manipulated. We want to acknowledge our wrongs, an acknowledgement that presumes that there are wrongs and that there is moral truth independent of our judgment, to which we must conform ourselves. So the issue really boils down to the issue of reality. The left insists that reality is what the majority says it is. So they're in the business of reality shaping. They pretend that by shaping opinion, they will shape reality. So President Trump is a classic example. If the news agencies like CNN can go ahead and shape public opinion to the point that the president is no longer popular, no longer enjoys popular support, then that's the reality. Then the president is no longer popular, the president is a bad man, and the way they're trying to manipulate people is by going out and telling everybody what a bad man President Trump is, and thereby trying to lead, not report the news, not report what is actually going on, but again, acting as leaders and change agents and attempting to shape reality. So that brings us to the conclusion of another episode of The Drill. And until next time, thank you very much for listening and have a great day.